Hello, this is Minter Chen. In this lecture, we're going to discuss some of the traditional management theory, and eventually we're going to move on to discuss some modern management theory and impact of globalization and business ethics. I'm Minter Chen. I'm professor of management information system at Smith School of Business and Economics at California State University, Channel Island. And the learning objective of this lecture is to learn key figures, scholars, and the concept they have developed in the history of management field. And we will also study some emerging trends and some contemporary principles which are different from the traditional management theory. And also we'll study some key global trend, its impact to management practice, and also touch base on the ethics in management. And this is the framework again, POLC, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. And the traditional management theory actually do lay out this four major functions for management, and we're going to kind of trace back to its root in this lecture. Management has been around since the human being has been around. At least I would argue that there was management before we call it management. We can certainly find inspiration from Asian history and cultures in terms of how actually some huge initiative or project has been conducted. As an example, here you're seeing actually over here, that's the terracotta warrior, which is in Xi'an in China. It was actually the tomb for the first emperor of Qin, called Qin Shi Huang. And it's huge. If you ever have a chance to go to China, you should plan to visit Xi'an's the terracotta warrior. It's massive. And there is a documentary which I found that kind of describe a little bit of this terracotta warrior. You can kind of see for yourself. Also, under the leadership of Qin Shi Huang, the Great Wall in China was completed by him. I say completed just means the Great Wall was built in segments by various countries, which Qin Shi Huang unified, and he kind of connected those fragments of the Great Wall together. It's just thousands of miles long. This is also another must-see place if you ever visit China. If you go to Beijing, you can visit several Great Wall sites within maybe 2-3 hours drive. Okay, and this huge project definitely need management skill in order to get it done. Actually need very advanced management skill in order to get it done. So we really cannot argue that management as a field just started in the late 19th century. You can trace it back to more than 2,000 years ago. And actually, there's some literatures still remained, particularly in China, in the Chinese culture, that still give us a lot of inspiration to think about how we should manage any organization. So the early modern management principle, we're going to introduce a few. It's impossible to cover all type of management principle. One is Henri Fayol, who worked at a mining company. he developed something called administrative theory and also identified 14 principles called Fayol's 14 principle. And another classic theory is by Fred Taylor around the same time. Taylor is considered the father of scientific management. We also give it a name called Taylorism. It's well known to conduct time motion study, kind of time your movement and study how efficiently you can get certain things done. And Elton Mayotte in the 1920 and 30 conducted a very well-known Hawthorne studies. It's more behavior-based theory, focus on people instead of the task. That's kind of where the classic theory and the behavior theory are different from each other. So here it is. The classic theory focuses on task and the management function, like the planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. The behavior theories, actually focus on people. And however, both theories try to figure out the best way to manage individual to get higher productivity. And by the way, this slide came from Professor Dylan Cooper, who is also a faculty at the Smith School, specialized in organizational behavior, human resource management, and definitely management in general. It's a courtesy from him. Fayol's principle of management was developed by him, who worked in a mining company as engineer. And we're going to kind of introduce this 14 principle very briefly. And this principle still influences the management practice today. That's why it's still very useful to kind of understand what these principles are. And you can watch this YouTube video for the introduction of these principles. So I'm going to quickly just go over this 14 principle. It's also laid out in our textbook. The first is division of labor, which really means specialization, which means we divide the work up into more specific tasks and such that we can easily train somebody to do the job and in a very efficient way. The Ford Motor Company's Henry Ford's assembly line approach to assemble a car is considered the good example of this division of labor. Authority, or sometimes authority and responsibility, which means the authority, there's another name for it, is really power. What is your official power that give you the authority that you can give orders or command to ask somebody else to do certain work? However, study also shown that not only you need the formal authority, but a lot of time you do have the relevant expertise, which can also help you to kind of influence people in order to get things done. And with authority comes responsibility. And sometimes you may be given the responsibility, but if you don't have the power or authority, then you should probably go back to your boss and ask for certain authorities in order to carry out your work. Discipline. Discipline means that in an organization we will set rules and contract agreement, whatever, to govern the organization. So everybody will work according to this policy and rules. And also discipline can be enforced through reward employee with superior performance or penalize those who underperform. And the fourth principle is unity of command, which means one boss and one boss only. And you will find in a lot of organizations, sometimes we have too many bosses that give instruction. It's fine to have several bosses, but if they start to give conflicting instruction, then the employee will be very confused. Principle 5, unity of direction, which means there's only one plan in general. In terms of the one plan here means that for tackle certain problem, there's one plan that people follow. That's called unity of direction. Principle 6, subordination of individual interests, which means you put the organization's interests first before your own individual interest. Remuneration just means that people will be paid fairly for their contribution to the organization. Number 8, centralization, or sometimes we call it centralization or decentralization, which means that how we distributed the decision-making right in the organization. Some decisions were made in a centralized way at the headquarters, but a lot of time it's beneficial to kind of decentralize certain decision-making into lowered hierarchy in the organization, such that they can respond to situation more quickly. So how you balance this centralization and decentralization is one thing that any manager in the organization need to consider. The hierarchy, also called Scholar chain, which basically is about the line of authority. Like there's a hierarchy in terms of chain of command that this things kind of trickle down. If the top management give instruction, then people will translate the instruction into more workable implementation plan and then deliver that to the lower level. That's the kind of the chain of the command. Need to have some degree of unity and consistency in this case. Order just means that everything was in place, people, material was in the right place at the right time. But in order to have everything has its order, we may need to have policy and rule to govern the workplace task and personnel such that everything will be in the right place. Equity, principle 11, means people will be treated fairly, with dignity, and with respect. And it's a combination of kindness and justice. It is very important that we do treat all the employees fairly. Otherwise, there will be a lot of dissatisfactions in the organization, which may ruin the morale of an organization. And number 12, stability of the staff. It is important to have a stable workforce. A stable workforce basically means that the turnover rate in the organization, employees' turnover rate is relatively low. If you do have high turnover rate, then you need to spend a lot of money and time in terms of recruiting and training new employees. So low turnover rate usually is considered good. When you have a low turnover rate, basically you have very loyal employee who stay with the company for a long time. And that's called stability of the staff. Initiative means that the subordinates are given some freedom and authority to be innovative, to take initiative, and to deal with situations that may not be in the rule book. Esprit de corps really means harmony and team spirit across the organization. This is kind of related to team building. This will help the organization to build the morale and the unity in terms of its cultures. So that's the 14 management principle laid out by Fayol. He also actually identified 5 functions of management. This sounds familiar. Planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, controlling. In this case, commanding, coordinating could be considered what we called in our POLC framework as leading. And sometimes people do use the other term, staffing and directing, in describing functional management. In my opinion, directing certainly is related to commanding, which is related to leading. Staffing probably should be considered part of the organizing effort. So in this case, we will kind of try to summarize some of the things being discussed, particularly the management function, using this classic paper called Management Process in 3D. Remember, we described there's a process approach to management, and this diagram kind of captured the essence of the process aspect of management or management function. So I will have assignment related to the study of this article, which described the management process. But let me kind of show you here how actually we should read this kind of 3D diagram for management process. Okay, so if you take a look, there are 3 elements which include ideas, things, and people. This roughly kind of corresponding to the concept and conceptual skill and maybe the technical skill. Okay, roughly, and people skill. And the task involved in dealing with ideas, dealing with things or people, or managing ideas, things, and people. In this case, it's called conceptual thinking, administration, and leaderships. Okay, and in this definition circle, which define conceptual thinking as formulate, notation, administration, defined as manage details of executive affair. Leadership is influence people to accomplish desired goal. And another layer is called continuous function, which is problem solving, analyze problem, decision making, analyze the problem, kind of making decision, communicate your decision. So there's a little bit of sequencing in terms of identify, analyze the problem, making a decision, how you're going to solve the problem, and eventually communicate your decision or your solutions to a problem to a broader audience. So they refer this as a continuous functions. And the definition for each of the continuous function has been defined at the layer over here. The management function here is referred to sequential function, including planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and control, which we discussed. And the definition is given here regarding what is, for instance, staffing. Choose competent people for position in organization. Okay. And this sequential function can be further divided up into activity, and each of the activity can be further defined given the definition. So let me just pick one area which is related to human resource. For instance, staffing. We mentioned staffing means choosing competent people for position in organization. well, what's involved? What are the tasks involved in terms of staffing or in the HR function? We call it HR function right now. It's select, orient, train, and develop, which means select or recruit new employee, provide proper orientation so they get familiar with the new place, and provide them with proper training so they can do their job more efficient and effectively. And also to develop the right skill set for the employee once they have been hired. And here are the definitions. What do we mean by select? It's like recruit qualified people for each position, etc. Okay, so this kind of show you how this kind of a management process in 3D diagrams should be interpreted. And as I mentioned, I will have a simple assignment. Just make sure you kind of study this diagram in detail, although it is related to this classic management theory, and it's also very thoughtful in terms of put everything together. Let's move on just a little bit. Taylor was an American mechanical engineer. Now you can see actually Fayol is a mining engineer. This is a mechanical engineer. So engineering and management actually are somewhat closely related. And he's considered the father of scientific management. This you need to remember. And he applied more scientific approach to study how to do work more efficiently. And in 1911, he published a book called Principles of Scientific Management. And he and his colleague, Frank Gilbert and Lillian Gilbert, has also performed time and motion study to task that the people have to perform and then figure out a way to improve it. And Taylor also come up with some principle based on his scientific study of task performed by worker. This principle includes, once again, promote job specialization. This is similar to one of the 14s. And actually the first of the 14 principles by Fayol. And he replaced rule of thumb work methods with method based on scientific study of the task. And he scientifically select, train, and develop each employee. This is the staffing related activity, rather than leaving them to train themselves. This somewhat related to human resource management. And another principle is to provide detailed instruction and tool. He emphasized quite a bit on the development of the proper tool and give very detailed instruction to tell people how to get things done. And he also suggests that the manager should plan and schedule, and the worker will perform the task. Okay. So what do you think about this principle comparing to the 14th principle? Are there any differences? Taylor's principle then approach to management sometimes is referred to as a Taylorism. And in this ads, they're selling a shovel that has been actually empirically determining the optimized size of a shovel by tailors, and it's good. He actually calculated it's designed to hold an average of 21 pounds load of stuff, and this kind of gives you a sense of how detailed and serious Taylor was about the tool and the methods, and actually go an extra mile or develop a specific tool for a specific task. And last, I want you to see this video and let me know what you think, and what in this video that the director or whoever made the video tried to convey. And the video is actually a silent movie by Chaplin called Modern Time. It's a scene in a factory. So enjoy this segment of the movie. I would talk to you later. Bye-bye.